Dougie.
Sam.
On Tuesday, Bayern Munich beat Real Madrid for the first time in over a decade and won at the Bernabeu for the first time in over 2 decades. In doing so, they became the favourites to win the Champions League in many people's estimations. So my question is this: who or what could stop them?
Are Bayern Munich the best team in Europe? Do you know how insane Bayern Munich's stats are right now?
Is Michael Olise on for a Ballon d'Or?
I have to be honest, since I've come to this club, I've come to realise how incredibly high the standards are.
I'm not willing to go out and say that they're the best front line in world football just yet.
By the numbers, by the statistics, Bayern are a level above even everybody else.
Are they the team to beat in the Champions League this season?
If you beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League this season, you will probably win the competition.
I guess all we can go on is partly just the sheer numbers of Bayern's dominance this season, which are ridiculous.
Yes, hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of The Truth. The sun is shining, my childminder is finally back from holiday, and the Champions League delivered a classic this week. What could dampen my spirits? Well, that would be the British trains. Not in the studio, unfortunately, not sat next to my co-host Dougie Critchley due to a train error. First hot day of the year, power supply failure, no dice. But Dougie, we can at least still record a podcast over the internet. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm all good. Yeah, train's not working, but the Champions League very much in full flow. We are recording this on Wednesday prior to the Barcelona Atleti game, I should say, and prior to Liverpool versus PSG. But we had an absolute feast at the Bernabeu last night, and I can't wait to discuss it and Bayern Munich's general situation with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And no producer Jack at all this week. So last week we took his microphone, and this week we've taken him out. Yeah, we've taken him out of the equation completely. We've decided we cannot be managed. We don't need a manager. We don't need a producer. No, we just can't make it. The trains weren't the only problem today. It's been a bit of a logistical nightmare for us all, but hopefully we can get something out. So if this episode is full of mistakes and errors, you'll know exactly how good a job Jack does. If there are no mistakes, you'll know he's basically useless on a week-to-week basis. This is the ultimate test. This is the ultimate litmus test of Jack Collins. And it means I don't have to use my intro. I can save it for next week. So that's good as well. Yeah, work smarter, not harder. Right, let's talk Bayern Munich, who beat Real Madrid 2-1 at the Bernabeu on Tuesday. And for me anyway, Dougie, for large parts of the game, they looked incredible, like just brilliant. And although it's only 2-1, which is a bit of a shock in itself, they do feel like they have 1 foot in the Champions League semi-final because that's a 2-1 win at the Bernabeu. That means they've got the home leg to come, where they generally score between 5 and 8 goals put in home games. So it should be okay, but we're going to go ahead and assume that that's probably going to happen because we're pretty smitten with Bayern. And I feel like they've been raised all season by you when we're talking about potential topics. You're always sort of bringing up, we could talk about Bayern Munich this week. And usually I shoot it down, but this week's the week. This is the time, isn't it, to talk Bayern?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it was a super impressive display. It was a strange one, actually, because the highlights, if you watch the 6-minute highlights package put together, it really doesn't reflect the kind of story of the game. And I think this is often the case with highlights packages, but it was really evident here because, yes, Real Madrid had some phenomenal chances on the break. And Manuel Neuer, who I'm sure we'll touch on during this episode, who I'd kind of called into question some of his form this season, a few more mistakes creeping into his game. Was he sort of over the hill, or at least permanently over the hill, unrecoverably over the hill? He came out with an amazing display in this game and kept Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe, aside from his goal, quiet with some absolutely brilliant saves. But between both boxes, the gulf in class and quality and cohesion and almost creativity from open play, not on the counter-attack, was absolutely stark between these two sides. And it just continues what has been a magnificent season for Bayern Munich so far. I think it probably is the time to talk about them. I mean, Arsenal might be the only unbeaten side in the Champions League, but Bayern, I think, have been the story of the campaign so far in terms of how complete they are, the entertainment they bring to every game as well. Their league record this season, absolutely phenomenal. 23 wins from 28 league games. They're now 9 points clear at the top of the Bundesliga. They've already scored 100 goals in the league alone this year. They're just one short of their record that they set in 1972. And as you mentioned, Sam, they had a weird record against Real Madrid. So often these guys would meet, particularly in semi-final stages, and Cristiano Ronaldo would often knock them out. And the winner of this tie has often gone on to win the entire thing and definitely reached the final in the last 5 occasions. But on this occasion, it felt like despite Real Madrid finishing the game much more strongly after Bellingham's arrival, Bayern put out a statement. And as you mentioned, you do back them to score at home. They've scored in every single game so far this season. And it's difficult to imagine a pretty scrappy Real Madrid at times last night, keeping them at bay. But I mean, in terms of the sort of key battles in this one, Sam, what did you notice? Because there was a pretty stark contrast between the form of Bayern's right winger and Real Madrid's left back, for just one example.
Yeah, pour one out for poor Alvaro Carreras. Look, I'm glad you mentioned that the highlights reel maybe didn't necessarily reflect the real feeling of the game, because also, if you just look at the stats, that also, it feels like it doesn't quite reflect it either. If you just watch the highlights and you looked at the stats, you would see that Real Madrid recorded 2.2 XG, had 9 shots on target, 20 in total, 4 big chances, more than Bayern's 3. And if you've watched the game, you sat there thinking, what? It just didn't quite make sense, because Bayern were, for 75 minutes, like far and away the better team here. And I've come away from the game wondering how they didn't score 5. They probably should have had a penalty in the last minute when Carreras went through the back of Olise, which crowned a particularly miserable night for the Real Madrid left back. He was, we'll call it a learning curve, a learning experience, shall we? Because Olise just drifted past him constantly, like he wasn't there. But it wasn't just Carreras, was it? Because Olise was jinking past 2 or 3 or 4, and whoever they sent to help Carreras was not able to help whatsoever. Bayern dominated the midfield. Kimmich and Pavlovic were brilliant, absolutely brilliant against Real Madrid's 4-4-2. Kane was dropping in. Olise was nice and wide. Luis Diaz was causing problems. Konrad Laimer got forward really well from left back, and except for one pretty obvious mistake, I thought Upamecano, who again we'll touch on all of these players in greater detail soon, did pretty well, I suppose, like as well as you can do against Mbappe's just extreme and ridiculous speed and natural finishing ability. And Neuer, of course, with 9 saves on the night. Looking a bit 2014 Algeria, if you don't mind me saying, Manuel. One of the greatest nights in his life, and one of the greatest nights, I think, for goalkeeping in general, changing the face of the role in this sport. And I got echoes of Algeria 2014 from Manuel Neuer at the age of 40 now. So very well done. And look, you're not the only one to have called his form into question this season. I think he was particularly good at the weekend, for example. So let's not get too carried away. But Bayern, just a 2-1 score, but much the better team. And we're very much expecting them to move into the semi-final. Regardless of whether they do or not, I think we can probably say up until this point, and as we stand right now, a lot of people are starting to look at Bayern and saying they can't be beaten. They're the favourites. They won their first 10 games of the season, and there was some murmurs about how good they might be. Then it sort of dipped off a little bit, and that feeling is back. So let's explore that in a bit more detail finally. But I think this conversation starts with the appointment of Vincent Kompany almost 2 years ago, which I know that you want to drill into.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, because Bayern's recent history was really chaotic in terms of managerial appointments. You know, after Hansi Flick left in 2021, they won the league that season. That was following their treble year, but they lost in the quarterfinals against PSG. Then Nagelsmann comes in, and Nagelsmann does pretty well, but behind the scenes, he's not getting along particularly well with Hasan Salihamidzic, but he's fired when they are just behind Dortmund in the league. They are through to the DFB quarterfinals against Eintracht Frankfurt, and they've got a Champions League tie against Man City to come. Tuchel comes in, and eventually he only lasts one full season, which was 23-24. Bayern finish third behind Leverkusen, who go unbeaten throughout that entire campaign as well. And then comes the appointment of Vincent Kompany. Now, to say this was chaotic is doing chaos an understatement. You know, this was driven by their new recruitment team. So Hasan Salihamidzic, the same year that they get rid of Nagelsmann, they get rid of Nagelsmann in March. He's gone by May. It's too many decisions. He's trying to get too involved in the affairs of the team, and he is gone. They went for pretty much every manager under the sun before settling on Vincent Kompany. So they tried to go for...
Uli Hoeneß has said that he was 5th choice for what it's worth.
I think that's quite generous.
I would agree, but just so you know, we're not just plucking numbers out. I mean, even Bayern have admitted that this was by no means plan A, B or C.
Well, I've got the list here. So this was now driven by their new recruitment team of Max Ebel and Christoph Freund, the former RB Leipzig sporting director as well. So Xabi Alonso, Nagelsmann, who they tried to get back, and Ralf Rangnick all turned down the job. Palace then blocked an approach for Oliver Glasner. What a sliding doors moment that would have been for Palace's recent history and potentially Bayern's too. They then tried to reverse their decision to fire Thomas Tuchel. He doesn't want the job. Hansi Flick held talks with Bayern, but he eventually joins Barcelona. They approached Unai Emery, but he chose to stay at Aston Villa. They even considered Julen Lopetegui before he took the West Ham job. Hoeneß says they spoke to 4 or 5. I think it was more like 6, 7, 8 potentially. And there was a lot of skepticism around Vincent Kompany's appointment at the time. It's worth remembering he spent 2 years at Burnley. They got promoted with 101 points. But the following year, just 24 points that year. They finished 19th. They conceded 78 goals. There was interesting selection, issues. Muric played particularly badly for the first half of the season. They introduced Trafford way too late. No one in that side could regularly score goals. And looking at that side, only the season or the summer prior to Vincent Kompany taking over, that's when Nathan Collins and Nick Pope and players like Dwight McNeil and Tarkowski left the club. So he was overseeing an era change at Burnley, and he did sign the likes of Odebear and Sander Berge, etc. So he showed his eye for recruitment. But in terms of where Burnley are at when he was hired, they'd been kind of embarrassed in the Premier League and a really bad patch for the relegated teams for those back-to-back years as well. So Burnley received £10.2 million in compensation, and I think they were probably quite happy with the arrangement. Very few people had many expectations of Vincent Kompany. He's arriving at a Bayern side that had just finished 3rd. But last season, they only lose 2 of 34 league games. Real signs of progress. They finished with 10 more points than the season prior. They scored 99 goals, which was their most since their treble-winning campaign. But this year, this side has really gone to a new level. And Sam, when you look at who they signed in the summer, I think a number of other players, I wish I was a player, other sort of pundits, as it were, if you want to even I think pundits quite generous, but commentators, journalists, whatever you want to call us, content creators, had some skepticism about the Luis Diaz signing, but that has proven to be a masterstroke. And then one of their previous signings in Michael Olise by Max Ebel has just gone supernova.
Yeah, right. So on Luis Diaz, I definitely thought Liverpool got the better end of the deal. Because getting that much money for a player in their late 20s, especially as a kind of speedy winger type, that felt like really good work from Liverpool in the kind of data analytics pilled world that we live in, where we're sort of trying always wanting teams to sign 22-year-olds that are the finished product on 5-year deals and then shift them on, which is very unrealistic at points and really not the whole point of recruitment, as we can come to later. Diaz felt like a better deal from Liverpool's perspective. I will say, as it stands, that being Bayern have 1 foot in the semi-final and nothing more, that deal still can't be considered some kind of like incredible success for Bayern as yet, because Bayern don't need to spend that much money on a winger to win the league or the DFB Pokal. Mm-hmm. The question is whether or not that player elevates them to a Champions League winning standard, to a team that could rival PSG, Inter from last year, etc. And like, it looks for all the world like it has done it, but we don't quite know yet. We're not just going to work solely back from results. However, it is going to form quite an important part of it. Also, if they win the Champions League next year, we can say with some assuredness. But for now, we're still kind of waiting on that. But I 100% underrated the deal from Bayern Munich's perspective. I did, and I'm facing that reality these days, as you seem to be as well. Olise, I mean, just an absurd performance at the Bernabeu. A really special individual showing. Was there a bad decision across 90 minutes?
No,
probably not. Which is just phenomenal for still a young winger. appreciate he's now he's a couple of years into Bayern. He's an automatic France starter. Like, this kid's 5th in the Ballon d'Or betting odds list. This is not a player who was up and coming, but still, for a player like this to get through, I think a whole game at the Bernabeu and basically not make one poor call on the ball in terms of decisions is just phenomenal. Got the assist, should have got a goal, should have won a penalty. Yeah, he's just ridiculous. So that is all starting. Lots of these elements are starting to come together. I would also just give Vincent Kompany a little bit of credit here for, I think, tactically adjusting just a little bit from last season to this season. John McKenzie's done a really good job of covering this on The Athletic this season. So I'll sort of almost summarize what he's been talking about this year. But Kompany's placing less of an emphasis on possession. Still wants lots of the ball, of course, dominant teams do. But he's okay with the other team having the ball a bit more. And he's also willing to create those transition moments on the ball by passing all the way back to the goalkeeper, trying to draw the opponent out, which you saw against Chelsea earlier this season. You also saw it a bit last night too, because Madrid were just sat there in a 4-4-2 block, and Bayern would then pass it back to Kimmich, back to Upamecano, back to Neuer, and try and draw them out to go back through them. Kompany is spending less time in the final third and less time on the ball and more time trying to create space and trying to find solutions. And he is adapting his template in the same way that I think Pep Guardiola has over the last 18 months as well. So we have to give him immense credit there, because he's still a developing coach and he is very quickly cottoned on to, I think, how to win in 2026 at the top level. And it's not just about having the best players. It's not just about having Olise. It's about using these players correctly. And what really strikes me about this team, Dougie, is, at least from a first 11 perspective, how well do these players mesh together? It's brilliant, isn't it? So let's just go through some of the combinations and the partnerships. So we've talked a lot this season about how Harry Kane is dropping really, really deep and playing as a 10, almost like an 8 at times. I mean, in some Bundesliga games, he's receiving passes off Manuel Neuer, right? He's basically Franz Beckenbauer. He drops in. So if he drops in, you need someone to run over the top. You need someone to get into the box so that defenders are occupied, so that Kane can then arrive late onto these crosses, which is what he's trying to do. And Serge Gnabry is now living a third life as a support striker who's pegging it into the box to occupy defenders to make sure that Kane dropping in doesn't hurt the team shape. Because these guys are occupying in the middle, Olise can stay nice and wide on one side and Diaz on the other. They complement each other really well. We've got two incredible midfielders controlling possession in Pavlovic and Kimmich. You've got a centre-back partnership, which I think I've underestimated this season. Two defenders in Jonathan Tah and Upamecano, who also complement each other really well. Like, Upamecano loves to go out and chase a quick forward. He loves to cover these big spaces. He loves to go toe-to-toe with Mbappe or Vini, whoever it might be. And Tah is much more comfortable just sort of going, okay, well, I'm just going to stay in the middle for a bit. I'm just going to hold the fort here while you chase that guy around a bit. It works. It's the old cat and dog mechanism. So I just feel like a lot of these pieces are working for each other. They've not only got really good players and a good coach, but they all complement each other. And Kompany has set them up in a way that they can complement each other. And that is why they look so good.
Yeah, I mean, you've summarized it beautifully there. I also think it's worth noting that, Alphonso Davies has only been fit to start 4 league games. That is a player that was commonly considered the best left back in the world a few years ago and probably would be in that discussion alongside Nuno Mendes if he had been fit more over the last couple of years. Jamal Musiala has only been fit to start 2 league games. Normally, if that happened to a team that had a new winger adapting in Luis Diaz, that had lost Kingsley Coman and Leroy Sané, and Thomas Müller, big titans of their winning success over the last few years, you'd be like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be Bayern's year. But instead, they are set to, they will easily smash the Bundesliga goals record. They start 10 past Atalanta. They start 2 past Real Madrid, and it could have been far more. And then I also want to give a little bit of credit to a couple of players that you didn't mention there. I mean, we go through the whole team and just wax lyrical about most of them. But I think Konrad Laimer is one of the most intelligent players in Europe. And the fact that you can play him so comfortably at left back, at right back, or in the place that he's actually supposed to be played in midfield. And he can invert, and he's so dynamic. He can actually overlap as well. What a brilliant player to have. I think Josip Stanisic, ever since that loan to Bayer Leverkusen when they won the League and Cup double, has taken so much confidence back to Bayern Munich and kind of proven, I can step in when there are injuries and I can cover even at centre-back at times. And then for Manuel Neuer, a player that I've criticised a lot, to step up like that in the Bernabeu and roll back the years, thoroughly impressive stuff with the pressure on as well. And this is a club that, yes, it's they've got a huge advantage in a Bundesliga where Leipzig have just lost Simmons and Sesko and Openda, and Leverkusen lost 7 or so key players, including Granit Xhaka. Dortmund have gone through a massive evolution over the last few years in terms of their playing squad as well. They were set up to dominate the Bundesliga this year as well. But this is not Vincent Kompany's been handed endless riches. Their net spend has been less than 54 million euros since Kompany took over. Sunderland's last summer alone was about 140 million pounds. So
different worlds, Dougie. Different worlds.
Different worlds. But some of their major arrivals since he's come in. So Olise, obviously, huge success, but João Palhinha's come and gone. Ito's been injured. Zaragoza has barely got a look in. He's now left the club. Nicholas Jackson's been a sort of backup player. Bischoff's been actually really useful in midfield.
Yeah.
Jonathan Tah, you've already called upon and mentioned, but these weren't huge, big name arrivals. And I think he's maximised the talents that he's got at his disposal. And it's now very, very difficult, I think. And look, we are, there is a second leg ahead, and there is Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr., individuals that don't need a single invitation to cause damage and knock teams out of the Champions League. They've done it for years, particularly Vinicius Jr. with Real Madrid, Kylian Mbappe with Real Madrid less so. But it looks very, very ominous for the rest of Europe, the way Bayern are playing right now. I mean, in terms of weaknesses, if we are looking ahead to potential semi-finals and finals, Sam, where would you, if you were an opposition coach coming up against Kompany's side, look to target?
So just before we go to the weaknesses, if there are any, and where you might target, just a couple of shouts just for a couple of interesting statistics for probably the most popular players on this team before we move on. Harry Kane, just in case people don't realise this, because a lot of people won't, because he just scores loads of goals and it just kind of passes people by because it becomes quite normal. So this even knocked my socks off when I had to triple check it. He has scored 48 goals this season for Bayern Munich in all competitions, which is it's a hell of a lot of goals. 48.
Freakish.
With 5 assists, just to add to that too. If he stays fit, then he'll probably score another 10 before the end of the season. Like, it's just a remarkable individual effort. And then from Michael Olise as well, there's a reason he started to get this Ballon d'Or chat, and it's not just the absent Jack Collins who is pounding the radio waves with this claim over and over. When I looked at social media on Tuesday night after this game at the Bernabeu, all anybody was talking about was Michael Olise. He was the main topic. All I saw were compilation clips of him, people talking about how good he is, and the fact that he is on 41 goals and assists in all competitions this season for Bayern Munich. The fact that he has 25 assists in all competitions for Bayern, and 28 if you include France international games, which means he's actually only, I believe, 5 assists away this season from breaking Lionel Messi's record for Barcelona and Argentina combined, which was 32 assists. Now, obviously, you'll probably remember that he complemented that with 8 million goals. So that's not to say that Michael Olise has fully usurped, but it really does go to show, to get 25, 28 assists, depending on club and country, it is a ludicrous number. It really is. And so far, Olise has 28 versus Messi's 32 in 20 games fewer. I mean, come on. Again, just putting it into perspective here, what a couple of these players are doing. And you know what? A lot of the other forwards aren't far behind in terms of production. I mean, Luis Diaz has actually played the most Bundesliga minutes of anyone for Bayern Munich this season, which is quite incredible, to be honest with you. And he's on 26 goal contributions in the league. It's a hell of a season for him. These guys, they look fantastic, absolutely fantastic. There's a very good reason as to why a lot of people have tallied up everything that they've watched over the last 5 months, 6 months, and then watched last night as well. Tuesday night's performance and gone, well, it's going to take some beating these guys. It really, really is, especially if Neuer plays like that, which he doesn't always do, which kind of brings us on to, potential weaknesses, which is that I wouldn't say that was anomalous for Neuer, but we're not used to that. That performance was not the sort of Manuel Neuer
certainly
that we've
been a while, yeah.
Typically been used to over the last couple of years. He missed quite a few games this season due to injury, which happens when you're a bit older. He's fought his way back from a nasty leg break when he went skiing during the 2022 World Cup, the winter where he went out, and then everyone was like, they have to sign Dominik Livakovic. If they don't sign Dominik Livakovic, they've missed a trick.
World Cup fever, Sam. World Cup fever.
That was World Cup fever for sure. But look, Neuer is typically not what he was, even if he's obviously clearly capable of special things. So will he be that good at every single game remaining in high-stakes games? Probably not. So there is one area. He might be injured. He might just not be as good. Other small things that might trip him up. Obviously, Harry Kane's fitness has been in question in the last 3 weeks. I think Thomas Tuchel's actually done Bayern a big favour there by effectively leaving him out of the England setup for the last 2 weeks. It's caused big problems here in England, by the way. We've all got a Harry Kane problem, apparently. England won't achieve anything without Harry Kane, and no one can fill his boots. It's like the first game Harry Kane has missed for England in the last 10 years. We all just lost our minds in panic. But he is clearly being managed on a fitness issue, and they'll have to hope he stays upright. Also, I appreciate that they're getting a tune out of lots of different left backs, but they've had 5 players play left back this season, Dougie. And that to me is it's not actually a good sign. Alphonso Davies, Konrad Laimer, Tom Bischoff, Hiroki Ito, and Raf Guerrero a couple of times have all played left back. There might be an eagle-eyed Bayern fan out there that would tell me that there might even be another one or two that I've missed. But that to me seems unsettled and not great, even if someone like Konrad Laimer can just come in and be, just incredibly solid and reliable. So there's 3 off the bat right there. I've got a few more, but what do you make of those?
Yeah, I think those are good shouts, to be honest. I think what's ominous for anyone coming up against them in the Champions League is that the Bundesliga is very much done already. I think I'd also add...
they can just rest Kane in the Bundesliga.
Well, exactly. If they wanted to. It looks unlikely that he's going to break the Bundesliga goal-scoring record. I mean, I think he's 11 short of Lewandowski as we record this. So it's humanly possible. But maybe they'll just keep him fit for the Champions League, where he's just gone past Thierry Henry in terms of Champions League goals. And given he was playing for Spurs for much of those years, a pretty, nothing Spurs side for a lot of those campaigns, I think that's really pretty impressive as well. He's also gone past Mo Salah. So huge respect to Harry Kane. I still think he gets such a hard time by elements of, people online that should largely be ignored. I would also add, and it's been a long-term issue with Bayern, and it's maybe because they concede so few goals from open play because teams are generally trying to counterattack from 80, 90 yards against them, which is pretty difficult to do. But they're not the best at defending set pieces. I think that's probably fair to say. And if they do come up against an Arsenal side who still have to put aside a difficult Sporting CP side and still have to beat a Barcelona or Atletico Madrid, like really no mean feat whatsoever, that is somewhere that Arsenal could target, hypothetically, if it was Arsenal. But you look at how this side is peaking at the right time. You look at the fact that they have scored 20 more league goals than any other side in Europe, despite playing 2 fewer games than most of those sides around Europe as well. And it's very, very difficult to imagine anyone stopping Bayern Munich right now. And actually, weirdly, Real Madrid feels like, and Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. feel like the sort of players that could pull out something out of the hat, really, and knock this side off their sort of momentum. They would potentially play PSG. Well, they'll definitely potentially play PSG, but it could be Liverpool as well. Again, that's a midfield and an attack that are starting to really click. Ousmane Dembele, 2 excellent goals at the weekend. Kavisha Kvaratskhelia, again, a kind of Vinicius Junior-esque player that can cause magic from anywhere. Desiree Doué, etc. But I make Bayern fairly strong favourites at the moment for the Champions League. And it's a hell of a story, really, because it is easy to forget that they were a bit of a mess before Kompany took over. They chopped and changed and been lost, and various sporting directors, various different ideas on how to go. And this is a squad and a club that I think have underperformed in the Champions League relative to their own ability over the last 5-6 years. You know, they're aiming to reach the semi-finals, I think, just for the second time in the last 5 years. There's been defeats in there, sure, to PSG, but there's also been Villarreal. They lost to Inter Milan last year, who are a very decent side and nearly won a treble before ending up with nothing last year. But there's still an element of, I think Bayern and this era of Bayern, the Lewandowski side, the Thomas Müller side, they should have won more Champions Leagues. And I think this Vincent Kompany side, which is still a relatively new iteration of it, for them to get to a final and potentially win it would be an enormous statement of intent for a squad that looks like it could go and develop even further. Because yes, Kimmich will drop out eventually, but you've got Pavlovic, you've got Bischoff coming through. They need to sort out Neuer's long-term heir. But aside from that, and Kane obviously is a lot, well, having said all that, you know, that is their past nine. So there are some potential, there are some potential issues there long term. But I still think it would be an amazing signal of intent for a Vincent Kompany project that many people doubted.
Yeah. So when I was watching the anthem last night with the teams lining up, obviously at the Bernabeu, and Real Madrid, the clues in the name, right? Royalty, European football royalty. Real Madrid, Bernabeu, Champions League anthem, royalty. You know what? Bayern Munich, football royalty. Like this was this. It's difficult to explain, but this felt like, two royal teams like facing off against one another. And you're right, Bayern haven't necessarily been at the level that their reputation commands in the Champions League over the last 5 to 10 years. The Jupp Heynckes treble team was incredible. The lockdown Hansi Flick, also a treble team, wasn't it? Incredible. They peak very hard, right? And then for the rest of it, they don't necessarily retain that high floor that a team like Real Madrid even does, which is always quite curious. But there was one thing last night that kind of bothered me, and this is something to monitor, I think. So we've agreed that Bayern were the better team. We've also agreed that Bayern probably should have scored more goals. However, last 15 minutes, Real Madrid are really coming to life here. Now, a big shout out to Jude Bellingham, who I think changed the game positively for Real Madrid. He came onto the pitch after an hour, replaced Pitak, who had a tough night. That was a lot for him. That was a lot for him. Bellingham comes on, and it's that physical drive. It's that bullish, direct play from midfield. You can suddenly just skip past a player, drive with the ball 30 yards maybe, just fire that pass into a Vinny or to Mbappe, and just give Bayern something else to think about. And I actually think Bayern really struggled to get a handle on that. And there's two areas of concern for me there. One, which is just overwhelming physicality and drive through midfield, which is, of course, what Arsenal offer when they're on song. And the other part is, I am not totally convinced that Bayern can actually, or maybe not, can they? Do they want to control, throttle games? Or are they just going to go like, hands up, let's just attack over and over again? Because they do tend to do that. They are quite a reckless is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Like they throw caution to the wind and they just go for you. And that does leave you open. It does leave you spaces, and spaces that Jude Bellingham tried to use to his advantage and did so, really. If you came up against a team who were more willing to take the game to you, because Madrid weren't really up to that much. They were down Courtois, they were down Bellingham, they were down probably 3 or 4 players. Rodrigo, obviously, long-term injured, and they played within themselves. What happens when a better team, like a PSG, for example, takes the approach that Madrid did in those final 15 minutes and really takes it to Bayern? Can Bayern keep a lid on the game? You know, can they absolutely outscore PSG in that scenario? It did just leave me wondering, because while we sort of have left the idea of total control of a football game behind in 2026, there's definitely room for it in 15-minute spells in high-stakes Champions League games. And I'm not convinced that Bayern can definitely do it, or maybe failing that, wants to do it, are interested in trying it. And if you come up against the PSG and you don't try to keep a lid on it, what happens? That was the question I came out with.
I think it's a very good question. I think what will be fascinating, and I do expect it to be PSG, given their recent record against English sides in this competition. I do expect it to be PSG that beat a Liverpool side that have already lost 15 games in all competitions this season. That's their most since 2014-15 under Brendan Rodgers. I do expect PSG to go through. A midfielder that has the control of someone like Kimmich, but also the dynamism, not quite as physically dominant as a Bellingham, but he's very, very dynamic on and off the ball, is Vitinha. And I can imagine him driving and playing 1-2s around a Bayern midfield that aren't particularly quick, I think it's fair to say, and causing some real issues in behind, and then quick transitions to Kvisha, to Desiree Doué, to Ousmane Dembele. If PSG have all their key players fit, I think that will be the tie of the entire competition, to be honest, PSG versus Bayern, because you can make a very strong case for either of them. It definitely doesn't feel like a foregone conclusion. And PSG, as they did last year, are rising in this season, in sort of March, April time. They're playing such better football than they were even 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. So that will be a tie to really look forward to. But I do agree with you. It was slightly... But then... Were Bayern ever going to go to the Bernabeu and have 90 minutes of total control, or pretty much total control with a few counterattacks? Probably not. But Bellingham was definitely the difference maker. Such an impressive display.
Yeah, I do appreciate that criticising a team for not controlling a game for 90 minutes at the Bernabeu on a Champions League night does sound a bit odd. I think my point there would be more like you're 2 up, you're 2 to the good. Are you interested in managing this game out? No, was the answer. Not really. It was still we want to go and get 3 or 4, and I think they're going to be okay off the back of. I think they'll get through the 2 legs, but it's not the approach that most would take, and it gets inherently more risky the better team you play. And there are better teams out there than Real Madrid. I know they have this affinity with the tournament, and they're a different beast on Champions League nights, but Barcelona, Arsenal, PSG are all, I would say, comfortably better than Real Madrid. And so it's interesting to consider what that approach might look like against one of those teams and whether or not it would unravel. And the answer is, Dougie, we will have to see, won't we? We will just have to wait and see.
It's tantalising.
It is. Right, Bayern Munich wrapped up. Really, really good football team. Exceptional football team. Champions League favourites? Possibly, yeah, at this point. I think anyone who had Arsenal is probably wavering a little bit based on some frigid performances over the last couple of weeks. Difficult in the cups, but at least they did win in Lisbon. We will see, but we're not counting out PSG, and we're certainly not counting out Barcelona either. So time will tell, Dougie. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Sam.
And sorry I couldn't join you in person. Those damn pesky trains. Thank you very much for listening as well. We'll see you... We'll call it same time next week, I'd say.